Hi, Gov class. Let's talk a little bit more in depth into the course content now. So let's start with the obvious place to start, which is the Constitution, the foundations of the Constitution, the philosophical underpinnings, right? The colonists have this problem, right? Because they think men will be greedy, ambitious, they're easily corrupted, they seek power, and that people are not secure in their natural rights, in their unalienable rights, and they wanted to find some sort of system after the revolution to try and secure rights of property, rights of person, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, because what they'd experienced under Great Britain was not that. And so they wanted to find something different. So in that sense, the American Revolution was a real revolution, okay? It wasn't just this, bunch of people took up guns, overthrew the government, instituted a new government, and kept everything the same, just changed who was ruling, okay? This was a fundamental shift from a system that they saw as illegitimate and not able to secure natural rights and liberties to a system that was designed to defend the natural rights of individuals. So we get what's known as the Articles of Confederation. That's created in 1781. It's a really weak system of government. Some people call it a League of Friendship because the states are all empowered. The states are granted an incredible amount of power and authority. They are sovereign, right? The federal government, the national government, is a creation of the states and subservient to the states. So all of the former colonies, who are now official states, are essentially all independent, free countries who have just sort of agreed to be buddy-buddy with each other and try to work collectively. No strong central government. The government had no capability to raise taxes, to form an army. It had no real power and authority. All power and authority rested with each individual state. So you had 13 states passing 13 different types of laws, 13 different types of currencies, 13 different trading preferences. You had states that didn't like each other and were rivals. So you'd have, Georgia and the Carolinas fighting over trade, or Virginia lumber competing with Maryland lumber, and they didn't like each other, so they'd set up tariffs between states so they wouldn't trade, and it was a giant mess. And so, this is what it looked like at the time, okay? You've got these colonies here, got these states, they're all fighting with each other, they're not doing so hot. Articles of Confederation is not serving its purpose, and so we get a constitutional convention. There's a call to reform the Articles of Confederation, right? The experiences that many people had under the Articles of Confederation led them to believe the Articles of Confederation was not the right form of government for the newly free colonies, the now states of the United States of America. As I said in the previously at the beginning of this slideshow, one of the main purposes was to secure rights and freedoms and individual liberties, but states didn't do that. You can look at states like the state of Pennsylvania, which in its constitution essentially took away land and resources from people who were rich. There were no protections for property, no protections for religion, no protections against unreasonable searches and seizures in the state constitutions. States essentially were running amok, causing all sorts of crises, and there was no real system in place that was able to check the power of state governance. They were all powerful, and they didn't respect rights or liberties. And then to top it all off, in 1787, we get what's known as Shays' Rebellion. A bunch of farmers who owed debts. They were unable to pay them back. They take up arms, and they essentially lead a revolution against the government. And since the Articles of Confederation does not allow the national government to raise an army. State militias had to voluntarily put down Shays' Rebellion. And they had a heck of a time doing it because states didn't want to commit troops. It was a giant mess. No one was interested in doing it, and it was incredibly difficult to put down the rebellion. So after Shays' Rebellion, people are like, we need a new system. This isn't going to work. All right. We need a stronger central government. We need 3 branches of government. Right. We need an executive branch with a president. We need a legislative branch, and we need a judicial branch. Okay. Under the Articles of Confederation, you had no real executive, right? You had a legislative branch that was impotent, and states did all the judicial review themselves. So they wanted to centralize it. The framers of the Constitution met 55 delegates, none from Rhode Island. Rhode Island's a real pain in the butt during this whole process. They were young, educated, well off. We know Hamilton from the musical, Madison, George Washington was there. Thomas Jefferson and John Adams were not there, which is interesting because Jefferson is the author of the Declaration of Independence, but he's not at the Constitutional Convention, so he's not able to influence what comes out. And what comes out is a newly written Constitution. They decided to completely scrap the Articles of Confederation and start over with something fresh and new. They wanted to have a commitment to liberty and natural rights, and they saw people, right, direct democracy as a threat to liberty and natural rights. Direct democracy was what threatened natural rights more than anything else. People and their ability to persuade government directly threatened natural rights and liberty, what the framers thought. At the Constitutional Convention, you get 2 competing plans, a Virginia plan and a New Jersey plan. Virginia plan is a proposal to create a strong national government. New Jersey plan is a proposal for a weak national government. Eventually, these 2 proposals get merged together in what's known as the Connecticut Compromise, and they create a bicameral system of government. A Senate and a House of Representatives. The Senate has equal representation for each state. The House of Representatives has representation based upon your state's population. Create a moderately strong executive with a president. The framers really wanted a system where the president was strong enough to enforce laws, to put down insurrections, to ensure the government functioned appropriately to secure people in their lives and their property and their rights, but not too strong that the president would ever become a tyrant. And the way they wanted to select the president was via a system that's known as the Electoral College, where every state would have a certain number of electors who would select the president. And the purpose for this was that people could not elect the president, right? The president would be seen as a national symbol of great importance and great character, and so every state the electors from each state would take on the responsibility of picking the person with the greatest national character who would represent all people in the United States. The Senate was not directly elected when the Constitution was written. 2 members from each state, equal representation for each state. Senators were selected by state legislators. So every state legislature picked people to go to the United States Senate. The only part of the government in the original Constitution that was directly elected were members of the House of Representatives. So you still directly elected your member of Congress. That was the only directly elected, popularly picked position in the entire government at the time. So what do we get with the new Constitution? We get a republic, representative democracy, right? Very little direct democracy, almost entirely representative. We get judicial review, and it's based upon some key principles: natural rights, natural liberty, Federalism, which is division of powers between states and the national government, where they have similar overlapping powers in some instances, and in other instances they have separate powers that some for states and some for the federal government, right? And we have a system of separation of powers. So we have three branches of government that are all supposed to check each other, and there's separate but equal branches of government. The powers for each branch are enumerated. They're specifically listed in the Constitution. If you pull up the Constitution, you go to Article 1, Section 8, it lists all the powers of the United States Congress. If you go to Article 2, it lists all the powers of the President. There are reserved powers, powers that are specifically granted to states. And then there are concurrent powers, powers that both states and the federal government have together. For example, the power to tax. So the reason they wanted a Republican form of government or a representative form of government is because of that issue of human nature. I believe people are naturally corrupted. Men are not angels. Men are not good. And so this representative government with separation of powers and federalism would preserve rights and liberties even in the absence of political virtue. Because all the branches of government would check each other. The legislative branch would ensure that the executive branch didn't get too strong and vice versa. And the executive branch could appoint members of the judiciary, but they had to be confirmed by the United States Senate. So there's all these checks on power that are written into the Constitution. Not only that, but representative government checks people, right? People are naturally inclined to form groups and associate with people who are similar to them. This is what Madison and Hamilton thought. And because of that, people will form what are known as factions, interest groups. Interest groups will compete for power, for political power. And you want to check those interest groups because those interest groups are not representing the common good or representing people at whole, but narrow interests. And so you want to do is make sure those groups cannot gain power of the government, because factions who gain control of the government will impose their narrow ideological agendas on the entire country. And so the way you control factions is by having a government that is almost entirely not directly elected, almost entirely not responsive to popular opinion, right? Only the House of Representatives is elected, and even then, even if one member were part of some crazy faction, their power is diluted based upon the fact that anything that passes the House of Representatives has to also pass the Senate and be approved by the President, checks and balances. So they wanted to control interest groups who might try and take over power, take power and control the government. At the Constitutional Convention, there were two main factions. There are the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. So the Federalists wanted strong national government, thought that liberty was best preserved by a large country, right? Because their thought was, if you have a large country, you have lots of people. Lots of people means that there are more groups, because there are more associations with more people. Those associations will check each other, less ability for factions to gain control. It'll moderate those factions and moderate coalitions. The Anti-Federalists really preferred the Articles of Confederation. They were advocates for states' rights. They liked small republics, small confederations. They thought that there was a need to limit the central power of the government. And really here's a deep philosophical disagreement, right? The Anti-Federalists are not afraid of people having direct control over their localities, whereas the Federalists are deeply concerned about people having control. And the Anti-Federalists demanded a Bill of Rights. So the original Constitution as written does not include the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights are the set of 10 constitutional amendments that are added on after. The Anti-Federalists insisted on this. So if we look at the rights that are guaranteed by the Constitution before the Bill of Rights, the writ of habeas corpus protected. The writ, basically, you need to know what you're being charged with and what evidence is against you. No bills of attainder. Congress cannot directly punish someone without a trial. No ex post facto laws. Can't pass a law that makes something illegal after it's already happened. You have the right to trial by jury. Citizens from each state are entitled to the same privileges. And there's no religious qualification for office. But as I said, the Anti-Federalists insisted on a Bill of Rights. They would not support the Constitution or the new form of government without a Bill of Rights. Madison at the Constitutional Convention had to promise the Anti-Federalists that he would introduce a Bill of Rights in the first Congress. Also slavery. Slavery is a byproduct of, or I should say slavery in the Constitution is a byproduct of compromise, right? The framers, the writers of the Constitution needed Southern states to ratify, to confirm, to approve of the Constitution. In order to get them, they needed to include protections for slavery. So slavery is written into the Constitution, it's protected by the Constitution, and we also get what's known as the Three-Fifths Compromise, where slaves are counted as 3/5 of a person for the purposes of counting people to apportion members of the House of Representatives. And we can see here ratification. Rhode Island, the pesky Rhode Island, being a real pain. They're the last state to confirm, to ratify the Constitution. So, what motivated the framers? Well, their economic interests. Their property were not secure, as I said before, in many states like Pennsylvania. Property rights were not guaranteed by the government. Equality was something that they did not care for, right? They wanted to preserve liberty, but not equality. So equality is not a political value of the United States, frankly, because economic equality, according to the framers, necessitates a destruction and disintegration of liberty. But people are politically equal, right? So political equality is a value, right? Everyone has the right to one vote. I get one vote, you get one vote, Bill Gates gets one vote, Donald Trump gets one vote. Everybody gets one vote. Everyone is entitled to the same political rights. No one has more political rights than anyone else, and that's necessary for liberty. And they sought to create a system that disincentivized political privilege. Political privilege is the greatest inequality that you can have, right? So having some people with a lot of political power and some people with none was seen as one of the greatest threats to liberty. And that's all I've got for you now. Next time we'll talk about federalism.